The light in the window across the street had been on for 11 days. Not unusual on its own. People leave lights on. People travel and forget to set timers. People work late and sleep late and live their lives in patterns that don't always make sense to observers. But Ellen Marsh had lived across the street from number 7 for 23 years. She knew that house the way you know the face of someone you see every day. Not through study, but through accumulation. Through 23 years of looking out her kitchen window while she made her morning coffee. And the light in the upstairs window of number 7 had never been on for 11 days straight. It was the bedroom window. Ellen knew this because she had watched Margaret Cole move into that house 19 years ago. She had watched her unpack, one lamp at a time, the particular light of each room establishing itself against the evening dark. She had watched Margaret's life through that window the way neighbors do, not intrusively, but inevitably. The light patterns of a house tell you things whether you are trying to learn them or not. Margaret Cole turned her bedroom light off when she went to sleep. She had done this for 19 years. The light had been on for 11 days. Ellen crossed the street on the 12th morning and knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again. She waited. She stepped back and looked at the house. The curtains were closed. The mail slot on the front door was visible from where she stood, and she could see, or thought she could see, the edge of something pale pressed against the inside of it. Paper. Several days of paper. She tried the door handle. Locked. She went home. She called the non-emergency police line. She explained what she had observed. The light, the days, the mail. The operator was polite. She said an officer would do a welfare check. An officer came that afternoon. He knocked. He looked through the mail slot. He noted the accumulated mail. He contacted the department. They entered the house the following morning. Margaret Cole was not there. The house was undisturbed. The bed in the upstairs bedroom was made. The kitchen showed signs of a meal that had been prepared and partially eaten approximately 2 weeks ago. A cup of tea on the counter, long cold, never finished. The bedroom light was on a switch by the door. It had been left on. Margaret Cole was 71 years old. She had no family that the police could immediately identify. She had lived at number 7 for 19 years. She had, as far as anyone knew, no reason to leave. She was gone. Detective Paul Reeves was assigned to the welfare check follow-up on a Tuesday morning. He was 47 years old. He had 17 years with the department. He worked missing persons with the particular thoroughness of someone who understands that the cases nobody pays attention to are often the ones that matter most. He started with Ellen. She sat across from him at her kitchen table, the same table where she drank her morning coffee, and looked out at number 7, and told him everything she knew about Margaret Cole, which was both a great deal and very little. She knew that Margaret had moved in 19 years ago, that she had come alone, that she had never in 19 years had a visitor that Ellen had noticed, that she drove a gray sedan that was now, Ellen had checked, still parked in the driveway of number 7. She knew that Margaret was quiet and polite and had, over the years, exchanged the standard currency of neighborly interaction. A wave, a comment about the weather, once a conversation about a problem with the shared drainage that ran between their 2 properties. She knew that Margaret had a garden in the back that she tended carefully. that she received regular deliveries from an online grocery service, that she walked every morning at 7 a.m., the same route, returning within the hour. She had not walked on the morning of the 11th day, or any morning since. Ellen had noticed this too. She had not acted on it immediately, because she had told herself she was being nosy. Because the particular training of a lifetime of being told that other people's business is not your business had overridden what she now understood was a genuine alarm. She said, "I should have come sooner." Paul said, "You came. That's what matters." He asked, "In 19 years, did Margaret ever mention her past, where she came from, family, anything?" Ellen thought about it carefully. She said, "Once. We were talking about the garden. She had remarkable roses. And she said something about learning to garden from her mother. She said her mother had a house in the country. She said it in the way people mention things they don't intend to expand on. She said, I had the impression there was something there she didn't talk about. I didn't push. Paul wrote this down. He asked, did she seem afraid of anything? Anyone? Then she said, Ellen was quiet. There was something. About 3 months ago. I saw her standing at her front window, the downstairs one, the living room, looking at the street. Just standing there, looking. It was early morning, before her walk, she said. She had a look on her face that I noticed because it wasn't like her. She was always composed. Whatever she felt, she kept it to herself. But that morning she looked. She paused. She said, watchful. Like she was looking for something specific, or someone. Paul went through the house at number 7, with the careful attention of someone reading a document he doesn't want to miss anything in. The house was clean, organized, the home of a methodical person who had thought carefully about how she wanted to live. In the study, a small room off the hallway lined with books, he found the desk. The desk was clear except for one thing, a notebook, open. The last entry dated 16 days ago. 2 days before the bedroom light had begun its unbroken vigil. The entry was short, written in a small, precise hand. It said, he found me. I don't know how. I thought I had been careful enough. I thought 20 years was long enough. I was wrong. I need to think about what to do. I need to think carefully. I cannot make the same mistakes I made before. Paul stood at the desk for a long time. He read the entry again. He said to the empty room, "Who found you, Margaret?" The notebook contained 19 years of entries. Paul took it back to the department and spent 2 days reading it. Margaret Cole had not always been Margaret Cole. This was not stated directly. She never wrote her previous name. She never wrote where she had come from or what she had left behind. But the entries, read carefully and in full, assembled a picture that Paul was able to construct by the end of the 2nd day. She had come to number 7 19 years ago from somewhere else. She had built a life deliberately and carefully. She had chosen the house, the neighborhood, the name with the intention of someone who needed to be unfindable. She had been unfindable for 19 years. And then, 3 months ago, she had seen something from her living room window that had told her she was no longer unfindable. The entries in the 3 months before her disappearance were different from the 19 years that preceded them. More guarded, more watchful. She wrote about a car she had seen parked on the street that she didn't recognize. About a man she had noticed at the grocery store who had looked at her in a way that had made her feel seen in the way she had spent 19 years trying not to be seen. She wrote, "I have been here before. I know how this feels. I know the difference between ordinary attention and the other kind." She wrote, "I thought I was done with this. And then, 16 days ago, he found me, and then nothing." Paul identified Margaret Cole's real name through a combination of financial records, dental records, and the particular expertise of a colleague who specialized in individuals who had rebuilt their identities from scratch. Her name was Catherine Marsh. She had been born in 1952 in a small town in rural Ohio. She had married at 22. She had left the marriage at 30 and had, in the years that followed, moved 4 times before arriving at number 7 under the name Margaret Cole. Her ex-husband's name was Gerald Marsh. Paul looked up Gerald Marsh. Gerald Marsh was 74 years old. He had been convicted in 1991 of assault causing grievous bodily harm. He had served 4 years. He had been released in 1995. He had a current address in a town 2 hours from number 7. Paul drove there on a Thursday morning. Gerald Marsh opened the door of a small house on a quiet street and looked at Paul with the expression of a man who has been expecting a visit like this for some time and has decided that the best response is calm. Paul showed his identification. He said he was investigating the disappearance of a woman named Margaret Cole, also known as Catherine Marsh. Gerald said, "I haven't seen Catherine in 30 years. Paul said, "When did you last try to find her?" Gerald said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "I'd like to speak to a lawyer." What the investigation uncovered over the following 6 weeks established a timeline that explained everything except the one thing Paul needed most to know. Gerald Marsh had located Catherine, had located Margaret, 3 months ago. How exactly was a question that took investigators 3 weeks to answer. The answer, when they found it, was a genealogy website, a DNA database, a distant cousin of Catherine's who had submitted a sample without knowing or considering what it might reveal to someone who was looking. Gerald had submitted his own sample 18 months earlier. He had been waiting for a match that would give him a direction. He spent 3 months locating her, watching, confirming, and then, 16 days before, Paul stood in the empty house at number 7. Something had changed. What had changed was that Catherine had seen him, not face to face. From her window on a morning 3 months ago, she had seen a man on the street that she recognized. 20 years older, slower, but recognizable. She had not confronted him. She had not called the police. She had instead done what she had done 30 years ago when she understood that staying was not survivable. She had left. Catherine Marsh was found 6 weeks after her disappearance. She had gone to a shelter in a city 400 miles away. A shelter that did not require identification. That understood, without needing it explained, why a 71-year-old woman might arrive with one bag and a need to be somewhere that a man who had hurt her 30 years ago could not find. Paul drove to see her on a Tuesday morning. She was sitting in a common room when he arrived. Small, composed, the kind of composed that comes not from ease but from decades of practice. He sat across from her. He said, "I've been looking for you." She said, "I know. I've been trying to decide whether to let myself be found." He said, "Why did you decide yes?" She thought about it for a moment. She said, Because I'm 71 years old and I'm tired. I'm tired of running. I've been running for 40 years and I am tired, she said. And because my neighbor noticed the light. Paul said, Ellen. Catherine said, I don't know her well. We talked about roses once. But she noticed the light and she made a phone call and someone came. She said, I've spent 40 years thinking no one would notice if I disappeared. That was part of how he made me feel, that I was invisible, that no one would look. She said, Ellen looked. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, that matters to me, more than I can explain. Gerald Marsh was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment under laws that had not existed when he had last been convicted 30 years earlier. The laws were imperfect for his case. The conduct that had made Catherine's life a 40-year flight was mostly beyond their reach. But what he had done in the preceding 3 months was a not. He was convicted. He was sentenced. Catherine Marsh returned to number 7. She did not stay. She sold the house. She moved somewhere else. Somewhere she chose this time not from fear but from preference. A smaller house, a garden, roses, because she had always loved roses and had spent too many years planting them in places she was afraid to stay. She called Ellen before she left. She thanked her. Ellen said, I just noticed the light. Catherine said, that was everything. Paul Reeves still works missing persons. He thinks about the notebook sometimes, about 19 years of careful entries, about a woman who built a life with the deliberate precision of someone who understood that the only protection available to her was invisibility. He thinks about the genealogy website, about the unintended consequences of the particular human desire to know where you come from, about the ways that the tools we build for connection can be turned toward other ends by people who are looking for something they have no right to find. He thinks about Ellen, standing at her kitchen window with her morning coffee. 23 years of looking until one morning what she saw made her cross the street. He thinks about what would have happened if she hadn't. He thinks about the light, about how it burned for 11 days in a window that was usually dark by 10, about how that was all it took. A light left on, a neighbor who noticed, a phone call made. Sometimes that is the whole distance between someone being lost and someone being found. This story is fictional and created for entertainment purposes only.